Hey everybody, it's Chris Peel, writer, creator, founder of Bootlegger Comics. Hey, thanks for coming in and watching the show. I appreciate you being here. So we got a few things to talk about. First thing we're going to talk about, first topic of discussion is the Nostradamus Effect. Of course, our debut title, now live on Kickstarter. I'll have a link in the description below to the campaign. So, let's get to the story. An obsessed academic, obsessed with the legend of Nostradamus and his skull, and acquiring his abilities, participates in this ritual of drinking from the skull, and is gifted the prolific prognosticator's abilities. However, and there's always another side to it, there's always a price to pay, right? They then become a tool of death's rage. And that's what this story is about. The scholar drinks from the skull, gets the gifts, also becomes the curse. And then you have, so when they drink from it, they get the visions, and then they become this walking plague, just nasty, just bilious, black, yuck, just belches, from their mouth, and kills this whole team that's with them. And of course it's supernatural, so it's all escalated, right? It's all people are melting right away, pustules bursting, and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted it to have a supernatural bent to the plague. So yeah, so that was my idea with how to handle this kind of duality and the gift, but also the curse. And this scholar is aware of it. They're aware that they're not going to die. They become transformed into some kind of evil, right? And they don't care. They want that power. They want that foresight, and they want to kill a lot of people. But that's for more backstory stuff that I don't want to reveal just yet. So then you've got the CDC. The CDC gets wind of this little outbreak in this town in France where Nostradamus is buried, and they send one of their CDC disease detectives over to investigate, to find out what is the pathogen, and how can it be stopped, and this, that, and the other. And while she's there investigating the initial crime scene, there's an Interpol agent there who is trying to determine, is this a terrorist thing? Is this, something that's been weaponized and has gotten out of, leaked out or something like that. And then they end up teaming together, and it becomes kind of an investigation into what this whole situation really is. The story is completely written. It's 100% written. It's about 12 issues, 12 chapters. The first 5 pages of the part 1 are complete. It is a 26-page story. And let's talk about the art team for a minute. So I've been so blessed to have the talent I have working on this project with me. Pencil and inks are by Carlos Granda. He's got an extensive resume of indie published work, and the colorist is Chompe Ramirez. The two of them collaborate together often, and it shows. I mean, the work that has come from it is just absolutely beautiful. The line work is great. The colors are they just leap off the page. It's just absolutely beautiful. And then for letters is indie legend Eric Weathers, Letters by Weathers. And so everybody's done an amazing job. Armidas Blanco has done some illustrations. He did 2 illustrations for us, one for the Nostradamus Effect and one for Sangre de Cristo, which we'll be releasing either late this year or early next year. I talked about chapter plates, and for the chapter plate for this, Will Thompson is providing that. Now he's a painter, and I just, I was just going through Instagram. Instagram's where I had the most luck finding artists, and I was going through Instagram just looking up, artists with, open for commission, and it was showing me everything. It was showing me, digital, traditional, comic book, painters, tattoo artists. It was showing me all different types. And I'm glad because it brought up Will Thompson's art, which just stopped me dead in my tracks. There was one piece in particular where it was the devil, or it looked like the devil, and this old guy, like, I want to say they were playing chess, but I mean, I just like sat there for a minute, just stared at it, and it's such a unique style, and the way he uses color is just, it's just really great. So he was, or not was, he is actually doing a cover for us for Sangre de Cristo, and then I reached out and asked him if he'd be interested in this chapter plate idea, and he's definitely all over it. So really thankful to have him on board as well. Yeah, so that's the talent team we have involved in the Nostradamus Effect, and I could not be happier. Yeah, that's pretty much an overall of the Nostradamus Effect. So, all this sounds interesting to you, and I hope it does. It's a really great story, very unique, and take a look at the link. Like I said, it's down in the description, and go back us. Let's make it happen. So thanks for listening, and let's get to talking about Jim Lee, huh? What do you say?
A legend centuries old, a power entombed in bone, wrapped in a curse. Obsession takes hold, and the world will burn.
And we're back. Cool. We're back. And thanks for sticking around. Thanks for making it through the break. And we're going to talk about Jim Lee. So Jim Lee recently made some comments that caused quite a stir. Jim Lee, of course, the legendary comic book artist and now publisher for DC Comics, made some statements regarding manga and American Western comics. We'll call it American comics from here on out. And it kind of rankled some people a little bit. I mean, personally, I don't see anything. I don't see anything he said as being derogatory towards American comics. It's just a reality of the comic book industry right now. So, let's talk a little bit about, what some of the things, some of the points he made. So, one of the points he made was manga having such a wide range of genre diversity, right? Just tons of different types of books, from horror to sci-fi to action to soccer and cooking, etc. And that, whereas American comics are, pretty much focused on superhero stories. And, if you think about it, so basically what manga's doing is it's casting a wider net. And by doing that, it's bringing in, more readers. So whereas, DC is got a much more focused approach, and, you can't argue with the numbers, that are coming out when it comes to market share. And then the other thing he touched on was accessibility. So, and accessibility, kind of on two fronts, right? Just getting a book, right? So manga is available. Yeah, it's in your local comic shop, but it's also in bookstores. And you can get comics in bookstores, but they're generally just going to be graphic novels. And those graphic novels, can carry a pretty steep price tag compared to manga titles, which average around $10. Also, your manga, single, graphic novel type book, it's a complete story arc. There's no need to be aware of any kind of continuity, anything that happened beforehand. You can just jump right in and read that story arc. Each one's got a great jump in point. Whereas that's not necessarily the case with American comics. You've got on a lot of these titles, you've got decades of continuity to catch up on or find out about, to figure out in a lot of aspects what's going on in the current storyline. So those were the two main, I think, the biggest points he made, and is definitely evidence as to how manga has been eating American comics lunch. It just offers more. There's more selection. Another thing he pointed out was, in Japan, manga is culturally accepted across all ages. Whereas here in the states, comic books have kind of a stigma where they're thought of as just like children's entertainment. There's still that stigma that comic books are, childish. It's definitely improved over the last, 25 years, maybe 30, especially with, a large part and thanks to the film industry. When books like Road to Perdition, Juno, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, those things are being made into films. It's kind of changing the perception a bit of comics. So, but it still is, it's in America, it still carries that stigma of childish or child entertainment. And so those are big, and I think that's probably more, the stigma is probably more for doing a job of keeping adults out who maybe have never collected comics before, more so than people who are already in it or have been in it. But so that's really kind of a general overview of the comments he made. I I think, I mean, he's right on all points. On all those points, they're totally valid. And, you know, as a custodian of the largest comic book brand in the world, he's got to look at that stuff. Any good business is going to evaluate who's dominating and why. What are they offering that we're not? And then you look at what their successes are, and then you try to adapt that into what you're doing. And frankly, that's what I think DC and Marvel both need to do, is because the audience is adapting, and but it's hard. It's hard for a company like DC or Marvel to just all of a sudden pivot to something completely different from what they've done. Plus, the superhero stuff, that's their pillar, right? So that's their foundation. They would be fools to get rid of that stuff. But in my opinion, of course, this is just my opinion. I am no expert. I've never ran a major corporation like that. But I think they would do well to pare down some titles, especially Marvel, pare down some titles, and then look at what are maybe start with what the top two genres of manga books what the top two genres are, and then say, okay, well, let's say it's just for the sake of argument here, let's say it's horror and sci-fi are the top two genres of manga books. Well, then DC says, all right, we're going to cut back a few books, a few titles, but we're going to release two titles in sci-fi and two titles in horror, and no capes showing up or anything, no superpowers, nothing. Just these two genres, two books in these two genres, and come up with some kind of a hybrid manga format, and see what happens. But corporations hate risk. Corporations like predictability. And that's what things like, when Diamond was in their heyday, that's what they offered, was predictability. And that's what corporations love. Plus, corporations move so slow. Any kind of change, corporations are very slow to make. So it's going to be interesting for the next 10 years to see how things pan out, to see if Marvel or DC try to make any changes, or if they're just going to continue to, steam ahead and hope that they ride out this, period of transition that these audiences are doing. In the end, only time's going to tell, So yeah, Jim Lee never said anything about American comics are dead. That's what I had heard at first, that he had made a statement that American comics are dead. And I was like, what? A publisher for DC Comics is actually coming out and saying that. But no, he didn't say that at all. If anything, he was just praising manga and just being real. You're talking about a guy who's been in the business 30 plus years. Started out as just super high in demand comic book artist, publisher, and now this steward of this enormous IP ecosystem. So everybody breathe a little bit. It wasn't as crazy as people are making out, but that's pretty much just a quick overview of the things Jim Lee talked about, and his observations on what manga is doing right and where there's struggle for American comics. And I think the big takeaway, though, the biggest point is that manga is able to reach audiences that American comic books have struggled to. Anyways, so hey, thanks for joining me on the Jim Lee Talk. After this next break, we're going to talk about The Mandalorian and Grogu, the movie nobody asked for. What?
They say history repeats itself. That those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. This January, you will pray they're wrong.
And we're back. All right. Thanks for sticking around. So our next topic is the Mandalorian and Grogu film coming up in a few months. Here we're 4 months out from the film releasing, and we've still only had one lackluster teaser trailer. My opinion on this is, and nobody really knows anything about the story, season 3 was a disaster for the show, and I just think nobody has asked for a Mandalorian movie. When I think it was season 2, when season 2 ended, there was a lot of rumors flying around, that Pedro Pascal was, kind of ready to move on, and was kind of done with the role, and frankly, I feel they kind of ended Din Djarin's story arc. But so there was all this kind of supposedly all this kind of hullabaloo going on behind the scenes. And I was like, well, Disney has a really good opportunity here. And what I thought they really should have done with season 3 is they should have done like a 150 to 200 year, even maybe 250, 300 year time jump. Okay, and you have Grogu, who would be kind of like young adult, ish, and then obviously Din had passed, and kind of the idea I saw in my head would be, like for the teaser, right, would have been, you start at a character's like feet and you're panning up and you're seeing it's the Mandalorian armor, but then you see the little tiny lightsaber hanging off the hip, and then it's Grogu. It pans back, and there's Grogu staring at this big statue of Din Djarin, and he's Din is like this legendary figure, and he's just standing there, and then he gets a communique, for like a bounty or something. He puts the helmet on and, turns around, jets off, and says, "This is the way." Boom. And that would be awesome, because now Grogu is the Mandalorian, right? It's kind of a passing on of the story and the narrative. So he's the Mandalorian, and you've got you're out from having to worry about continuity with any of the previous films. You don't have to worry about stepping on the toes of future films, because you're far enough out that it's not going to make a big deal. And it gives Disney the opportunity to bring in new characters, new species, just a whole new thing, without destroying Star Wars legacy in a film. But no, seriously. And I think that's what they should do if they're going to do a Mandalorian Grogu movie, which obviously they did. That's what they should have done with this film. Is Din's story is over. Now it's time for Grogu's story. Do this time jump, and let's see what Disney can come up with, without being tied down to Skywalkers or anything. And man, I still think that's a really great idea, but it's obviously not what they're doing here. But things aren't looking that great. So the marketing has been non-existent for this movie. But this Mandalorian thing is, I just don't know how long they can keep up this lone wolf and cub storyline, thought line, because Din will be at the end of his, Din will be 90 years old, and Grogu will still look like a little baby. So I'm ready to see, like a young adult type of Grogu. So I loved season 1 of The Mandalorian. Season 2 was good, and then season 3 just fell off the rails. So, but now with Cowboy Dave Filoni taking the reins, who knows? Maybe he's got some magic, and there was magic in that old cowboy hat he wore. Oh man. Anyways, so I got dad jokes for days. So that's kind of my thought on The Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't think it's a movie anybody has really asked for. I think if they're going to stick which obviously they're sticking with it, where he's just a baby. It really kind of lends itself more to a television show. I think they're missing a really great opportunity to really launch something that can really be 100% Disney. With doing this time jump, but we'll see. I'll in all likelihood I'll go see it. I've seen every Star Wars movie in the theater. I haven't watched all the Star Wars shows. I didn't watch Andor. Just didn't do. I mean, I just wasn't interested in it really. The prequel, or I'm sorry, the sequel movies were just terrible. I gave a lot of leeway to The Force Awakens, just because it was, a new Star Wars movie, and it was just a rehash of A New Hope. But I thought, you know what, I like A New Hope, so I was excusing all of the stuff with Rey, being perfect, and all this stuff. But then they did, I'm getting off subject here, but then they did Finn so dirty. They had a great opportunity there with Finn. They could have, and Poe, there was allusions in The Force Awakens to both of them being potentially Force sensitive, and I think they missed a really great opportunity to have another trinity of characters be the spine for the sequel and build off of that. But instead it was all about Rey, and then Finn became just essentially a throwaway character that was used for laughs. And Poe, all he was brash and would get dressed down for it, emasculated in a way. So, anyways, that's enough about the sequel films. But so the Mandalorian and Grogu, we'll see. There's speculation that there may be a new trailer during the Super Bowl. So we'll see if that pans out. I would think that they would do something, because we're really getting close. I think, like I said, I think we're about 4 months out from release, and there really hasn't been much. So that's Star Wars. That's a little bit of Star Wars news. I love Star Wars. You can see I got my little Star Wars wall here. Man, this was like, these autographs and stuff, these were when you could get them for like $20. And I got Billy D. Williams, I got Peter Mayhew. That's Mark Hamill that my cousin got for me. Jeremy Bullock, Jeremy Bullock, David Prowse, and then Porkins. I can never remember the actor's name. And then Ray Park. Oh man, that was my favorite. That was my favorite. Getting that sign and meeting him. Yeah, it was my favorite character in the prequel trilogy. Oh, so awesome. Anyways, hey, thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this premiere issue. Oh, geez. I hope you enjoyed this premiere episode of Hanging Out with Bootlegger Comics. I had fun bringing it to you. Next week, join us. We'll have all new topics to discuss. And the Super Bowl will have come and gone, so we'll see if there's a Mandalorian Grogu trailer. So everybody have a good one, and we'll see you